The Sound of Music looks almost perfect on screen, but the movie we know today was not the movie filmmakers originally planned. Entire scenes were filmed and later removed. Major songs disappeared from the story, and one deleted sequence would have changed the relationship between Liesl and Rolf. Some scenes were even altered for audiences in different countries. So what was left on the cutting room floor, and why did these moments disappear? The version of The Sound of Music the world knows almost did not exist. When director Robert Wise and his team adapted the Broadway musical for the big screen, they did not simply copy the stage production. They changed songs, moved scenes, reshaped characters, and created new material specifically for the movie. 3 songs from the stage version were removed, while I Have Confidence and Something Good were written for the film. And some changes went even further. One planned version of Do-Re-Mi would have taken Maria and the children through a garden maze. Storyboards were created, and the sequence was carefully planned before it was ultimately abandoned. Why? Because making a great movie is sometimes about knowing what to remove. The filmmakers wanted the story to move naturally. They wanted Salzburg to become part of the experience. They wanted the audience to feel Maria's relationship with the children growing, instead of simply watching one musical number after another. That meant some perfectly good ideas had to disappear. One of the most fascinating examples involved Liesl and Rolf. In the finished movie, Maria never meets Rolf. But a scene was actually filmed in which Maria, Liesl, and Rolf appear together. According to reporting from the Rodgers and Hammerstein organization, the scene was removed because the movie needed to be shorter. Think about how small that decision sounds. One scene, a few minutes, nothing that seems important at first. But removing it changed the way several characters connected. The final film makes Liesl and Rolf's relationship feel more isolated. Maria is outside that particular part of Liesl's life. The audience watches a young romance develop without Maria becoming directly involved. The deleted scene could have changed that feeling, and that was only one of the changes. The filmmakers also reshaped the roles of the Baroness and Max. Their characters were reduced, while several songs from the stage production were removed entirely. So the movie that became a worldwide classic was actually the result of countless decisions about what viewers should not see. But there was another side to the story. Some scenes were not simply deleted before release. They were cut later for television broadcasts or altered for audiences in different countries. One version shown in Germany even ended at Maria's wedding, removing the final section because of its Nazi-related content. The movie had become so famous that different audiences were sometimes watching different versions of the same story. And once you discover how much was changed, one question becomes impossible to ignore. What would The Sound of Music have felt like if those missing scenes had remained? That is where the story gets even more interesting. The strangest thing about the missing footage from The Sound of Music is that some of it involved characters we thought we already understood. Take Liesl and Rolf. In the finished movie, their relationship begins with youthful excitement and ends in heartbreak as Rolf becomes loyal to the Nazi regime. The official Rodgers and Hammerstein history notes that the film makes Rolf's turn darker than the stage version, where he ultimately helps the Von Trapp family escape. But during filming, the story around Liesl and Rolf was given more space. A scene involving Maria, Liesl, and Rolf was actually filmed in Salzburg. It did not make the final movie. The official Sound of Music archive even includes a rare behind-the-scenes photograph from the filming of a Salzburg scene that ultimately did not make the final cut, centered mainly on Liesl and Rolf's storyline. Imagine watching the finished movie with that scene still there. Maria would have had a closer connection to the young romance unfolding between Liesl and Rolf. It could have given the audience another window into Liesl's growing independence and the complicated relationship she was building with Rolf. Instead, the scene disappeared, and that small cut helped make the final story feel tighter. The filmmakers were already changing the stage musical for the screen. Screenwriter Ernest Lehman redesigned the story around Salzburg itself, moving characters and musical moments into real locations instead of simply recreating the Broadway production on a soundstage. That meant the movie had to keep moving. Every extra scene had a cost. Every extra minute could slow the story. So even material that had already been filmed could end up on the cutting room floor. And the changes were not limited to Liesl and Rolf. Several songs from the stage musical never appeared in the movie. How Can Love Survive was removed, along with the other song performed by Elsa and Max. The filmmakers also replaced An Ordinary Couple with Something Good, a new song written specifically for the film. These were not random cuts. They changed the emotional shape of the entire story. The stage version gives more attention to Elsa and Max. The film shifts the focus toward Maria, the children, and Captain Von Trapp. The result feels more personal, more cinematic, and perhaps most importantly, more focused. But there was another surprising change hiding in the story. The film also changed Rolf himself. In the stage version, Rolf ultimately chooses to help the Von Trapp family escape. In the movie, he makes the opposite choice. His decision to serve the Nazis becomes one of the darkest moments in the story. So the scenes that disappeared were not just forgotten pieces of footage. They were part
of a much larger process that transformed The Sound of Music from a successful Broadway musical into a movie with its own identity. And the more you look at those changes, the more obvious one thing becomes. The classic everyone remembers was built by removing almost as much as it kept. The biggest surprise is that some of the most important changes were not scenes at all. They were songs. When The Sound of Music moved from Broadway to the big screen, screenwriter Ernest Lehman and director Robert Wise made a bold choice. They would not try to preserve every part of the stage show. They would reshape it for film. The result was a story that felt more focused on Maria, Captain Von Trapp, and the children. 3 major stage songs were removed from the movie: How Can Love Survive?, No Way to Stop It, and An Ordinary Couple. The Library of Congress notes that Lehman considered the first 2 unnecessary for the film and replaced An Ordinary Couple with the new song Something Good. That was a major decision. On stage, Elsa and Max had more musical material. In the movie, their role became smaller, and Maria and the captain's romance received something completely new. Something Good. The song was written specifically for the film, giving their relationship a quieter and more personal moment. Another new song, I Have Confidence, was created to show Maria's feelings as she left the Abbey and prepared to become a governess. So while audiences thought they were watching a faithful version of the musical, they were actually watching a carefully redesigned story. And then came the scenes. One planned sequence would have shown Maria and the children running through a garden maze during Do Re Mi. Storyboards were created, and the musical timing was worked out, but the sequence was eventually abandoned. Another filmed scene brought Maria, Liesl, and Rolf together. It was cut for time. In the final movie, Maria never meets Rolf. That small editing decision changed the feeling of their storyline and helped keep the focus on the Von Trapp family as a whole. There was also material involving Captain Von Trapp and Maria that never became part of the finished movie. Reports about the production describe a planned moment in which the captain reflects on Maria while she thinks about him. Again, it disappeared. Not because the idea was necessarily bad. Because the filmmakers believed the movie worked better without it. That is the strange truth about classic movies. What audiences remember as one perfect story is often the final result of hundreds of decisions about what to keep, what to change, and what to throw away. And the changes did not stop when the theatrical version was finished. Television networks later made their own cuts. Some broadcasts removed dozens of minutes to fit the movie into a shorter time slot with commercials. One NBC version even cut the scene in which Captain Von Trapp tears down the Nazi flag. So, different generations could actually grow up watching different versions of the same movie. And overseas, the changes could be even more dramatic. When the film was first released in Germany, the final portion was reportedly removed because of its Nazi-related content. The ending was later restored. The movie had become a worldwide classic, but not everyone initially saw the same film. And that leads to one final question. If scenes could disappear because they were too long, too sensitive, or simply considered unnecessary, how many different versions of this classic have audiences actually seen over the years? The answer reveals just how much The Sound of Music we know today was shaped by the cutting room. The strange story of The Sound of Music did not end when Robert Wise finished the theatrical cut. The movie continued to change depending on where, and sometimes when people watched it. That matters because the film was already unusual before it reached audiences. The filmmakers had reshaped the Broadway musical, moved songs around, removed entire musical numbers, and created new material specifically for the screen. The Library of Congress notes that Ernest Lehman removed 3 songs from the stage version, while I Have Confidence and Something Good were created for the film. But one of the most fascinating differences was the way the movie handled its historical ending. The story takes place as Nazi Germany expands its control over Austria. That historical reality becomes impossible for the Von Trapp family to ignore. In the finished film, the family secretly prepares to escape after Captain Von Trapp refuses to cooperate with the Nazis. That ending was not treated exactly the same way everywhere. According to documented alternate version records, an early German release was shortened so that the film ended with Maria and the captain's wedding. The later section involving the family's escape was eventually restored. Imagine seeing the movie that way. The family gets married. The music continues. The story appears to end happily. But the most dangerous part of their journey has disappeared. For modern viewers, that would completely change the meaning of the movie. The final escape is not simply an exciting adventure. It completes the historical conflict that has been building underneath the songs and family scenes. And Rolf's transformation makes that conflict even more painful. At first, Rolf is simply Liesel's young love. Then politics enters their lives. He becomes connected to the Nazi movement, and the relationship changes. The stage and film versions take that storyline in different directions. In the stage production, Rolf ultimately helps the family escape. In the movie, he chooses his Nazi loyalty instead. That is a major difference. It makes the film's version of Rolf much darker. And it gives Liesel's story a painful ending that audiences remember, even without seeing every moment that was originally filmed. Then there were television versions. A theatrical movie could run for hours, but television schedules had commercials and strict time limits. As a result, later broadcasts could contain cuts that were never part of Robert Wise's original theatrical presentation. That means some viewers did not simply watch The Sound of Music. They watched a television version of The Sound of Music. And that is where the title's idea of forbidden scenes becomes misleading. These moments were not necessarily banned because they were scandalous. Many were removed for practical reasons.
Some were cut for time.
Some were changed because the filmmakers believed the story worked better without them. Others belonged to different versions or adaptations. And some materials simply remained in the archives. In fact, the official Rodgers and Hammerstein archive still preserves rare photographs from scenes that did not make the final film. One Salzburg scene centered mainly on Liesel and Rolf and was ultimately left out. So the real mystery is not whether Hollywood was hiding some shocking secret. The mystery is how many different creative choices had to disappear before the movie became the classic everyone knows. And there is one final piece of the puzzle. Even after the movie was finished, recordings and alternate performances remained. Decades later, expanded releases revealed previously unreleased material from the production, including alternate takes from the 1965 film. The movie we remember is therefore only one version of a much larger creative process. And once you see how much was changed, cut, rewritten, and preserved, the final question becomes impossible to avoid. Was the version we know really the best version, or did the cutting room quietly create the masterpiece? The most fascinating thing about The Sound of Music is that the forbidden scenes were never really a secret scandal. They were something more interesting. They were pieces of a movie that could have been very different. The official Rodgers and Hammerstein archive confirms that a Salzburg scene centered mainly on Liesel and Rolf was filmed, but ultimately left out of the finished movie. That one detail gives us a glimpse into how much work happened behind the scenes before audiences ever saw the final version. And the changes went far beyond one deleted scene. The filmmakers removed 3 songs from the stage musical and replaced one of them with Something Good, a song created specifically for the movie. They also added I Have Confidence to show Maria's emotional journey as she left the Abbey and entered an uncertain new life. Those decisions helped turn the film into something more cinematic. Instead of simply copying Broadway, Robert Wise and Ernest Lehman built a movie around locations, movement, and emotion. The Salzburg filming became a crucial part of the production, helping the real Austrian landscape become almost another character in the story. And that may explain why the final movie feels so complete. Every major scene seems to have a purpose. Maria changes. The children change. The captain changes. And even Liesel's relationship with Rolf becomes part of the larger story about Austria being pulled toward Nazi rule. The official character history describes Rolf as an impressionable young man caught between his feelings for Liesel and the political pressure around him. That makes the deleted material especially interesting. It reminds us that the characters did not simply appear fully formed on screen. Their stories were shaped, shortened, rewritten, and sometimes removed completely. The final movie was released in 1965 and went on to win 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Its theatrical run became a remarkable international success, lasting years. But perhaps the greatest achievement was not simply that the movie became famous. It was that audiences rarely noticed how much had been changed. That is the mark of successful editing. When a scene works perfectly, viewers do not wonder what was removed. They simply believe the story was always meant to unfold that way. Today, rare production photographs give us small windows into that hidden process. We can see actors between takes, locations that were changed, and even a Salzburg scene involving Liesel and Rolf that never survived into the final cut. So were these really forbidden scenes? Not in the dramatic way some modern headlines suggest. They were deleted scenes, alternate ideas, and creative choices that disappeared as the filmmakers shaped the movie. And that may actually be more fascinating, because The Sound of Music was not born perfect. It became perfect through countless decisions about what the audience should see and what they should never see. The Hills may still be alive with The Sound of Music, but somewhere in the archives are the echoes of another version of the film. A version with different songs, different scenes, different character moments, and a different path to the classic we know today. If this story surprised you, remember that many famous movies have their own hidden production histories. Sometimes the scenes we never saw tell us just as much about a film as the scenes that became legendary. And if you want to uncover another classic movie's forgotten story, stay with us, because the next documentary may reveal what happened behind the scenes of another film you thought you knew completely.